All right, everybody, welcome to this week's Market Snapshot. What's happened in the Northern Virginia real estate market in the last 7 days in under 5 minutes. Here we go. Okay, so this week's Market Snapshot is going to be a little bit special because we're going to not only talk about the short term, which is the Market Snapshot, we're also going to talk about month over month. We're going to look at what happened in May of 2024 versus May of 2025. The numbers for the month of May are in. So remember, the reason that we look at both of these, and I know I say this quite often, but I just like to reiterate it so everybody knows what's going on. The reason we're looking at both of these is because when you're looking at the 7-day cycle, we're looking at what are called lead measures. And these lead measures are things like how many properties went under contract and how many new listings came to the market. Those lead measures give us ideas about what's happening right now in the market. So we can look at this 7-day window, we can see what kind of decisions we need to make in real time based on those numbers. And then in the monthly market report, we're looking at sold data. Now, the important thing about sold data is that sold data is going to be older data. So for example, when you look at sold data for the month of May 1st through May 31st is going to be included in that. So if we're looking at that data, that means the things that closed on May 1st likely went under contract on April 1st. Today is June 6th. So property went under contract on April 1st. So it's 30 days to May 1st, 30 days to June 1st. That's 60 days. Now we're at June 6th. That's 66 days. So that data is 66 days old as far as what was going on in that month. So we can't use that as data that we use to drive day-to-day decisions, but we use that as data to look at the big picture to see what the trends are. Are we leaning towards a stronger seller's market? Are we starting to see the market cool down? Are we starting to see moving into a buyer's market? What are we seeing? So it's important to look at both aspects of this and know exactly what decisions to make in the immediate time frame and in the big picture. So let's go ahead and look at the 7-day report first, and then we'll dive into the monthly report after that. All right, so as always, our as Kelly likes to call them, our squiggly black line is going to be the buyer activity. These are the number of properties that went under contract that buyers actually put under contract in the last 7 days. And you can see that there was a significant increase after Memorial Day weekend, which we kind of expected. And then you can also see this teal line is the inventory, and there was a significant increase there as well. So inventory is our supply, buyer activity is our demand, and you can see demand is still higher than supply. Even though inventory is significantly higher than it was this time last year, it's still significantly lower than buyer activity. So if you go down here, this gray line right in the middle, you can see is labeled as a normal market. Anything above that gray line is a seller's market, anything below it is a buyer's market, and you can see that we are still in a seller's market. Now, the good thing about this for buyers is that even though we're in a seller's market, it's not nearly as strong as it was last year. If you take that and put it over here, you would see that we would be sitting up here again. The reason for that is not because there aren't buyers, because the buyer activity, if you look at buyer activity this point of this year versus this point of last year, buyer activity is a little bit higher. So there's actually more buyers in the market, but fortunately there's also more inventory. So buyers actually have some choices to make. So the market is a little bit softer with regards to the multiple offers that you're going to fight against. So what this means for buyers is that there are properties that are sitting on the market for a little bit longer. That does not mean you can get a discount on those properties. So there's a couple things that we're seeing in the market from the buyer side. First thing is we're seeing properties that are sitting for 14, 21 days, and then all of a sudden they'll get a couple offers, and so they'll end up at that asking price or a little bit higher. So just because a property's been on the market for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they're still getting asking price or a little bit higher, unless they're overpriced, because we are seeing properties, especially in the condo world, where the property has been overpriced and it's coming down in price reductions. And I have several clients that are sending me all of these emails about price reductions in condos, and some of them are just, they're a fortunate deal because of the condo fees and the interest rates and stuff like that, that value, you can actually get it below market value. But that's very few and far between. We've seen one of those, and we actually got our buyer under contract on that one. But we see most of them is where the sellers have priced them way above what the market value is, and they're bringing them down to get to market value. Once they get to that market value, they'll actually sell. And to give an example of that, we had some buyers, some separate buyers, that were competing on a condo in Arlington this past weekend, and the property had been on the market for 31 days, around 31 days. They had done a price drop. They did that price drop. They ended up receiving 2 offers, and it escalated back up to the original asking price, which was the actual market value of the property. So that's just it's a unique market. When you're seeing these price drops, it does not mean that prices are coming down. It means that people are trying to find where the buyer pool is and what people are willing to spend for the property. So that's what's going on the buyer side. So it's very property specific. So if you're working with an agent, make sure that they're running the numbers for you and making sure what's going on and helping you look at some of these properties that may have been on the market for a little while. But if you see something that has been on the market, don't think you have a lot of time, because they can very quickly get picked up. Especially this last 2 weeks, we've been seeing buyer activity starting to pick up again. On the seller side, you have to price the property right. We say this all the time, but it's even more important right now. It has to be priced appropriately. It has to present well, and that's just you're not going to get 5 to 10 offers. You're going to get maybe 1 or 2 offers. So you really have to hit that pricing point just right, and you will get that top market value. Prices are still going up, as we're going to see as we go through the monthly review. Prices are still going up, so sellers are still getting top market value, but it's not as easy as it was last year at this time. Okay, so that's what's going on in the market. Let's dive over now into the monthly market to see what happened in May of 2025 versus May of 2024. Okay, so first thing we want to look at, and again, these are the monthly sold stats, monthly sold stats, and total monthly numbers. So for example, we have the number of new listings in May of 2025 was 1,519, which was down 5.5% from May of 2024. So we actually had less new inventory come on the market, which was kind of interesting versus May of last year. And this is all for Fairfax County, Virginia. The number of sales was down 6.2%. So inventory was down and the number of sales were down. So the difference in the amount of inventory and the amount of sales being down was about 0.7%. So we did have a little less buyer demand on those properties versus 2024. And that is, again, we have more buyer activity, but they have more choices. So net result of that is that you end up with a 0.7% drop in the total number of sales. Days on market, May of 2025 was, or 2024 was 13, May of 2025 was 15. So the properties on average are sitting for about 2 days longer. It's taking them an average of 2 days longer to sell. We're actually seeing that, in a real world feel, we can see that, it's actually more like maybe 5 to 7 days longer. But statistically, it's only 2 days longer. If you look at months of inventory, we're still only at 2 months of inventory, which indicates a strong seller's market. Again, months of inventory indicates absorption rate. Absorption rate means that if there were no new listings that came on the market, and the rate of sales continued at the rate that it is right now, how long would it take to sell out of inventory? And we would actually sell out of inventory within 2 months. And so anything 5 to 6 months or below is considered a seller's market. Anything 6 months and above is considered a buyer's market. So we're still in a seller's market with regards to this as well. Our median house price, this is, of course, is what everybody's always looking at. For May of 2025, it was $790,000, which is a 3.8% gain year over year over May of 2024. And you can see it was also a significant gain compared just to April. You can see that the prices since January 1st have just continued to go up. So everybody who's sitting there waiting for prices to come down, even if we end up getting a price drop here in the next year, which I don't think we're going to do, there's no evidence of it. We're still in a strong seller's market. We're seeing everything trend the way it's going to. We may flatten a little bit, but I don't see a price drop coming. Even if we do get a little bit of a flattening on that, you're going to be so far behind because you could have bought the same house for $700,000 in January, and now that house is going to cost you $790,000. So you're losing out if you're sitting there and waiting. That's almost a 10% increase just in 2025. Okay, so median house price, I've talked about this before. I'm not going to go into that right now. I did want to look at this because there's a lot of people that are worried about the crash coming and things like that just because of Doge and the tariffs and all the news. And there's always some concern that's in the market. So we have to look at it statistically because everybody's trying to time the market. And those that are trying to time the market, quite often they end up losing because they wait as prices go up. So if you look at from 1940 up until 2022, you can see that that was a total of 81 years, if my math is right. You can see there were 73 years that there was a net positive change year over year. In other words, 73 out of those 81 years, within that 12-month span, the net change was a positive change. Only 7 years had a negative change, so only 10% of the years had a negative change. And you can see here that these were like a -1%. That 0 was from a -1, so that's still considered a loss. We did have some significant loss here in 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Those were some significant losses, but then that was the crash that was caused by the real estate industry. That was the Great Recession. Outside of that, there really haven't been years that there have been years that the market's been flat like this, or that the market has gone up. So to try to time it looking for that crash and looking for a crash that's going to be significant enough to make up for the appreciation that happens while you're waiting is a challenge that is probably not worth taking. The other aspect of it is that if you're waiting for interest rates to come down, as soon as those rates start coming down, there's a lot of buyers waiting on the fence. They're going to flood the market, and you think you're going to save on your mortgage payment, but you're actually going to end up paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 more for the property because of a bidding war. So it's always the best time to go in the market right now, unless there's an obvious crash happening, but we haven't seen anything since 2007, 8, and 9. Before that, we probably won't see anything again for a long time. There's a lot of safety mechanisms in place to keep that from happening. So if you're a buyer, now's a great time to buy. If you're a seller, it's still a great time to get on the market, but you just have to be prepared appropriately and get that top market value. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at 703-783-2143, and we will be back next week. Have a great day.